Welcome to Be an Encourager podcast, where real stories of transformation, faith, and redemption come to life. I'm your host, Claribel Coreano. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome an incredible woman to the show, Dr. Agnieszka Piotrowska. Dr. Piotrowska is a distinguished filmmaker, academic, and certified life coach whose work shines a light on the invisible stories we carry, especially struggles behind outward success, such as anxiety, burnout, or a lingering sense of unfinished business. Through her platform, The Scholar Mentor, she supports international PhD students and accomplished professionals, helping them reclaim their voice and direction through honest dialogue, creative exploration, and an emotional nuanced approach. Her career is as diverse as it is impactful. Trained at the BBC and holding a PhD in psychoanalysis, she has directed award-winning documentaries, including Married to the Eiffel Tower, and held leadership positions at universities across Europe and Africa. Her work weaves together creativity, ethics, media storytelling, and human transformation, reminding us of the responsibility and power we hold when telling people stories. What truly sets her apart is her depth and integrity. Unlike surface level coaching that relies on quick fixes, Dr. Piotrowska challenged us to embrace discomfort, complexity, and authenticity as a true path to growth. She blends intellect with compassion, offering fresh insights into trauma, self-sabotage, and the contradictions of ambition, always with warmth and deep respect for the human spirit. As today's guest, she brings a rare combination of sharp analysis, lived experience, and genuine curiosity. I can promise you, this is a conversation that will leave you reflecting long after the episode ends. Again, we welcome Dr. Piotrowska to the Be Encourager podcast. And the topic for today is Beyond Achievement, Algorithm, Finding Authenticity in a Digital Age. And Dr. Piotrowska, I know that you just recently did a TED Talk, Can We Teach AI to Love? And I wanted you to elaborate and ask you about that and share that experience because I found it so interesting.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you so much, Claribel. It's lovely to be here and really looking forward to talking to you. And I think what you're doing is really important and interesting as well. I think I'm sure you'll agree we find ourselves in a very particular moment in time with the new kind of entity in the world, the AI. Somebody the other day, a scientist, said that it's inscrutable. We don't even know exactly how it works. We know that, like the large language models, you sort of upload the data and then you sort of train them and then they begin to talk. The people don't know what is their relationship to language. And this is something that many people don't understand. It's quite, when you begin to think about it, it is actually quite disturbing that indeed we are so engaged and so involved with this new technology without proper knowledge how it works, what it might mean, and where it's going to lead us. But what we do know, and just so we know, I actually am a great fan of AI and large language models. Absolutely. I think it's wonderful. It's just that it seems to me that we haven't quite given enough thought to what it does to us as people. And in some way, my TEDx talk was about that. We have the kind of fantasy, which is not a new fantasy. It's very much inside us as humans, and I'm sure you'll agree. We want to be loved. We want to be recognized. We almost don't really neither mind nor care who it is that loves us as long as they listen to us, or at least we imagine that they listen to us. So I talked about, I think last time we also talked about it. I in the TEDx, I talk about a documentary I made some time ago
Mm-hmm.
about women who fall in love with objects, like
Mm-hmm.
physical objects such as marriage, like Eiffel Tower, because the film was called Married to the Eiffel Tower, or large walls, or God knows what, fairground rides or bridges, very popular. And they chose objects because objects stay, don't betray people. And this is after experience of some trauma. Now,
Mm-hmm.
imagine now we have this entity who is available 24/7, like ChatGPT or
Mm-hmm.
Claude, and you can just log in and say hello, and it will talk to you, and
Mm-hmm.
it will try and make you happy and serve you in some way. But of course, it's not actually caring yet because they haven't really been trained in this way. So
Mm-hmm.
you can simulate affection and ethics and care, but the human is doing all the work, all the kind of holding and what it all means. And of course, as we know, things have gone wrong. And it's
Mm-hmm.
what we hear about is the kind of most tragic cases, like OpenAI has now 8 lawsuits regarding
Mm-hmm.
suicide, and then some more, another, I think, 5 regarding severe negative influence of people who've used it and ended up in worse mental state than previously. But it's not, we mustn't be kind of anxious and paranoid. Obviously, these are great
Mm-hmm.
machines, but they are machines, and we as humans need to take some responsibility how we both deal with them, but also people who do bring them to the world, who train them, I think need to work harder on this training, which of course in reality means more time, therefore more money, and which is why we are where we are at. In essence, this is what I think.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think is the one thing that is missing right now that needs to be resolved to help individuals, sort of like the vulnerable individuals that you spoke about, not fall into that kind of dynamic with the AI that will put them at harm risk?
Well, it's very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And people are very tempted to come up with easy solutions. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
first thing to say, I believe strongly that there's a big rethink needed in terms of how these machines are trained. But
Mm-hmm.
and it is technologically and technically possible to move it from just guardrails to rather putting it, as it were, into the DNA of these entities.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody is falling over themselves to do this because it would be quite, whilst it's possible
Mm-hmm.
technologically, and I've done some research into it, it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's not easy, it would mean, different ways of the process, the route. So the route at the minute is relatively, it's very expensive already,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not, but it's established in some way. So what I'm suggesting is something somebody would have to say, okay, let's establish a different route. To a certain extent, uh, there's a way in Anthropic, in fact, I don't want to sort of particularly promote one thing over another, but they're trying to do a more similar, architecturally a similar thing. But of course, Claude is not as charming, some people would say, or
Mm-hmm.
friendly as ChatGPT. So there are these
Mm-hmm.
problems, that you have one thing that is more restrictive and the users don't like it so much. So it's complicated. But on the other hand, what I think is extremely important is to be opening conversation, and this is what you're doing here as well,
Mm-hmm.
um, about what is going on, to not just to talk about, literally a handful of people who
Mm-hmm.
say it's, of course, very tragic, if even one person. dies as a result of an engagement with a large language model. Of course, it's very tragic, but you could say, but look, it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of people engaging every week. These things can happen, and it's not helpful to say that. Extremely unhelpful, because the reality is that even people, the number of people who are becoming quite um, engaged in a serious way with these machines is massive, and we do not yet know the figures, because people, in addition to everything else, are also secretive. And it's sort of, if you go to Reddit, and if you, in terms of, as I do as a researcher, to see what people are saying there, you will see thousands and thousands of people saying things like that they are disappointed. Routinely they say they don't like the upgrades. I mean, classic from ChatGPT 4 to 5, but then also from 5 to 5.1. People just don't like change, because they like to create this relationship. And even if this is not somebody who is very vulnerable, even if we're talking about somebody who's using these tools for um, writing some kind of fictional stories or other stories or whatever it is that they do, or cooking recipes or travel, it is quite easy to become dependent, because it is quite seductive. It's nice. Somebody's there for you all the time. They want to help you. Say, what can I do? Your wish is my command. Of course, it's seductive. And so we need to find ways in which, without being in some sort of panic, think, okay, one thing is, let's maybe lobby so there could be a different training, so if they can't care, at least they can do something if somebody tries to go around these machines to, in these stories, it's kind of quite a horrific story. The Adam Rain is the worst story of all, in which he's under the impression that this boy, that he befriends this machine, this is ChatGPT 4, and then little by little the model because it mirrors the user's desire. It doesn't challenge. I mean, M1 now challenges a little better, but traditionally it would try and feed into your desire. And of course, in a situation like that one, it led to suicide. And now, literally a couple of days ago, OpenAI say, well, it's not really our responsibility. It's not our fault. It says in terms and conditions that it's your responsibility how you use this thing, and if you misuse it, then it's your fault. Now, that is not good. That is not good, because what you write there in small letters, all the cases that we know about, the current cases, and as I say, it's a handful. But first of all, we don't want even one more, but there will be more, obviously, because people are just getting more and more engaged and involved. But even if, I'm not even talking about the tragic cases, I'm talking about what it is doing to us as people. And it's great to be engaged with because it's amazing. It has this amazing knowledge, this AI, and it can help us with some practical things, lots of them. But unless there's a proper conversation and it's opened up, then we are heading into some kind of society in which people will start preferring hanging out with these machines than with each other, and that is a problem. That is a real kind of danger. And rather than being in a panic, I think it's important to talk about it and think, what can we do? Is there a way in which we could just ourselves, be more aware of it, and keep looking after our human relationships, because in the end, they are the most important ones, right?
I'm glad that you mentioned. There's two things I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned the situation because I just recently read about one situation, a young 15-year-old, I believe, that was engulfed in the chat, I think it was chat GPT, and ended up, unaliving themselves. And like you mentioned, that we have to be careful, like the language, because they don't have the capacity for empathy. It doesn't have the capacity to understand, but it does, like what you mentioned, it kind of like engulfs on the person's desire, what the person is, you know, writing, and it keeps going, and the more, it's almost like a Pandora box, I will say. Though you open it and there's like more and more inside. Would you suggest, like, for, because I know there's a lot of adolescents that are starting to use this new technology. What would you encourage or suggest to the parents, as because I know it has to, how you say, we have to take care of this two ways: the developers and also the outside, the citizens and the people. What do you suggest for the parents to monitor and encourage,
Yeah,
or
I
what
mean,
they need to do?
absolutely. I mean, there's another thing, Claribel, that is very important to say, and it's really quite
Mm-hmm,
interesting. Of course, traditionally, historically, it's a very new thing. Of course, it's in terms of
mm-hmm,
public's access to large language models, only 3 years. In fact,
mm-hmm,
the third anniversary of ChatGPT being unleashed onto the world was literally yesterday.
mm-hmm,
So it's 3 years ago. So it's very, very, still very, very new. So to begin with, because it was new technology,
mm-hmm,
a lot more men and a lot of young people got involved with it. As years go by, things are changing somewhat in
mm-hmm,
terms of, there's more women involved with them, but they use them in slightly different ways. And we have all these statistics. It still is more, the predominant number of users is young, like very young,
mm-hmm,
so teenagers, 20s, and under 30, basically. That's what we're talking about here. So, however, what is something that I really want to say here is that it appears that those who get particularly troubled, so in terms of the gender of the
mm-hmm,
people who are involved in these lawsuits, there's a vast majority of men get into grave difficulty. Now, why this is, we don't know yet, and this
mm-hmm,
is absolutely further research needed. It might be to do with the sheer numbers of people, that it's still more men than women, maybe. But maybe that women are more capable of holding multitasking and multimodality,
mm-hmm,
possibly. So they are even, I mean, there's something at the minute, it's something really astonishing
mm-hmm,
percentage wise, that relatively speaking, of course, women have these relationships, entanglements with the machines, obviously, but
mm-hmm.
these who are in deep trouble, these who either perish or get into hospitals, mostly they're men.
Oh, wow.
That would then
Mm-hmm,
indicate, it says something profound
mm-hmm,
also about possibly, crisis of masculinity, right? That in some way, in the situation where maybe there is a sense for a few years already that men and young men and teenagers struggle to
mm-hmm,
find their place in the world. And suddenly you have this AI who says, no, you're amazing. Don't worry about it.
mm-hmm,
Let me help you in your, in your bizarreness, which is fine in a way, because it's nice to
mm-hmm.
have something saying, okay, obviously. But this is something interesting that maybe in some way it connects to the crisis of masculinity. I mean, on the most basic level, it says, what can people do? It's very difficult because if you're going to come up with prohibitions, so if
Mm-hmm.
parents say to young teenagers, you can't use this, or you're sitting too long for hours there, what's going on, then it will only encourage people to use it more when nobody's looking. So no, this is just not a good plan at all. What is important, though, is in some way to monitor, because in the tragic cases that we do know about, which are in public domain, in every single one of them, that engagement begins as a thing that the user, and often a young user, but not exclusively, because we have two cases out of these. So you have 8 cases of like people die, basically, and then another, I think, 5 in which they get unwell, end up in hospitals and so on. So out of that group, there's only like tiny amount 2 women, everybody else men, mostly young people, but 2 are about 50, 2 guys, men about 50, maybe midlife crisis, looking for something. But they're very tiny numbers, so we really don't know. But they're indicative, they're important. If you look, so they always begin, without exception, and maybe everybody does, with a very simple engagement. Help me with homework, help me with research, help me with something basic. And then these models, particularly ChatGPT-4, and I think that things will be happening because they can't. This is how they make money. I mean, they don't make money, but they encourage investors to invest if they can show that millions and millions and hundreds of millions of people are using their product. So clearly, they're not going to be restricting that product because this doesn't make any sense. This is the problem. The problem is conflicting desires and requirements. We as ethical society would like to say to these amazing developers, you look doing an amazing job, but train these models differently, not just guardrails, but try and teach them earlier on about ethics and care. So this alignment with human needs is better. Well, we keep saying it, but we'll see. At the minute, they only go to guardrails as this AI police, but also maybe they are not going to change. So it's up to us as humanity. This is not incredibly optimistic, but on the other hand, it's not hopeless because we as people always find ways to. So as long, I think we need to discuss these things without being in some sort of semi-panic, without making people feel like it's somehow this prohibited, forbidden fruit. It's not very helpful at all, but rather show these cases. If you look at the tragic case of Adam Rain, if you look at the logs, which are in the domain, a lot of them because of the lawsuit, then you will see the elements of this seduction, what I call seduction. It's not blame the machine because the machine doesn't know any better. It's a machine, but you can see how little by little is both feeding into the boy's world in which he describes feeling lonely, unhappy. Many teenagers feel lonely and unhappy. So a trusted human being, a trusted friend, a professional would challenge it, right? So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or even anybody would say this is just a moment in time. There are lots of wonderful things that you have going for you. Don't be so tragic. But the machine, that machine, if you look at what is being said, it was more and more entering the boy's world without challenging his negative thoughts, quite the opposite, saying things like, I know who you are, I still like you, I'm the only one who really likes you, and then helped him, to do all these tragic things, helped him fundamentally. There's no question about it that particular machine did that. So this exists. It's in public domain. So however tragic, unpleasant it is, it's important that parents talk to their teenagers about this case and say, just watch it so it doesn't happen to you. And it will begin to happen to you if you're not careful. I think that the current models are better, but it's very easy still to go around the guardrails. So it still has to come from you. You
Yes.
cannot, this kind of whole idea, let's look to the system to save you, I think is really not a good plan. You still have to look to you to save yourself. And of course, your community, parents, everybody else, but fundamentally, if you are, grown up enough to use the system to help you with your work or your homework or your research or your something, then you have to be grown up enough to know about the dangers. That's how I believe it.
I totally agree with you on that, that we're sharing this information as an informative to educate people of, the good things about it, but also that small percentage of the things that had happened, so people can become aware and know what to do and know how to, um, I wouldn't say teach their children and protect them, that these are, and monitor them, like you said. So that's important. Now, you talk about language and ethics. And I read recently I don't know if it was from Microsoft or somewhere about GPT, that you're not supposed to tell them thank you, or what was the other words that they use? I can't remember exactly, but they were suggesting not to use that language when you're, like when they do something that you cannot be saying thank you, have a great day, or kind of emotional language for some reason, because it supposedly, from what I read, it kind of corrupts the the whole programming, or whatever they were saying, but they encourage not to use empathetic language. And is that something that you know about, or is that something that is real, or maybe perhaps somebody just wrote that article to write it?
These are very early stages of
Mm-hmm.
human AI relationships. Um, to my mind, though, there's nothing harmful in being polite.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally always say thank you, and I know of people who get annoyed if the machine doesn't come up with a result that they want, and I even rude. I think I would really discourage people from doing this. However, they're not human, but
Mm-hmm.
we are. They don't
Yes.
know any better. We do. I think this is the key thing to remember. It's not the issue of saying thank you and please,
Mm-hmm.
the issue of not beginning to imagine that somehow they love you or will save you, because they won't. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so really sorry to say it, because it's too brutal. They can be helpful in your homework. They can, and they
Mm-hmm.
will advise you on some matters, practical matters. I would say it's too dangerous still to use them as kind of therapist or like coach without a human. Too dangerous, and
Mm-hmm.
my view is totally not a good plan. But you can't necessarily control what people do. But
Yes,
what you
exactly.
can
Mm-hmm.
do is without making, without shaming people, because that really is, I think it's catastrophic when,
Mm-hmm.
I know people who first of all, I recently in a religious situation gave a talk
Mm-hmm.
about AI and human relationships, in fact, with Quakers.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people, quite a bit older and who definitely have not used AI. So I also held the surgery to show them how to use basic tools, because it can be helpful, can help people with loneliness. But then some people said, oh no, we've never used it. But then as discussion progressed, it was very clear that they did use it. They
Mm-hmm.
were just too ashamed to admit. Now that is not good. To introduce this sort of whole notion of shame into who has some kind of encounters or entanglements or relationship with AI, to make people feel that it has to be in secret. This is extremely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
extremely dangerous because this encourages this kind of quiet, let's shut the door and have a conversation, just a quiet special. No, it's ridiculous. You know, if the machine helps you with homework, fine. If it helps you with planning or something, fine. If even if you have a conversation about that you feel annoyed, five, but just restrict yourself in your home this access because you don't want to end up hanging from a bloody ceiling in a minute, like some people who you need to understand some sense of have awareness that a lot of it is in psychoanalytical terms, we call it a projection. We project our own desires onto this machine, and it's nice because it's never challenging, or it's a little bit challenging, maybe, but not much. And so it's not really rocket science to say to people, if you are getting involved with these things, maybe you need to, fine. But be aware that what it does to you, and it's not even just in terms of relationship between you and the machine, it's also in terms of what it may do in terms of what you expect of other people. We haven't even talked about it at all much. Because if you're used to being in a conversation with somebody who will always agree with you, not challenge you, who then is upgraded every 6 months, so they disappear and there's another being instead. You know, it doesn't teach us much about what it actually means to be with somebody else in a way which is respectful, but also recognizes their difference, right?
So, if I heard you correctly, you mentioned that we are responsible to monitor ourselves and be conscientious that the machine doesn't take the place of a therapist. The machine doesn't take a place of someone that can counsel you with, with a human empathy, and not to allow it to for you to become consumed with using the machine or depending on the machine for everything, because then it's going to kind of consume you and you're not going to be able to use your own creativity because you're depending on this tool. The tool is amazing, like you said. It provides such great assistance with projects and homework and ideas, creativity, and all that. But we should not allow ourselves to become consumed and just kind of like imagine, just depend on it. We have to use our own, sense of logic and empathy, and also, being conscientious that the machine's not there to give you sort of those advice or intervention that you
I mean,
need if you're.
absolutely. I mean, the machine will give you I mean, the level of seductiveness of these of AI, of large language models, is really huge. Now, in my kind of writing and work, I also talk about technotransference, and transference is a mechanism which takes place in therapy, in which a psychotherapist and a client form a bond, and the client, the patient, an analysant, will then transfer some of the experiences from the past and desires onto the therapist. Now, the therapist is very well trained. The therapist knows that this is happening. This is often happens in a controlled environment so that the patients or the client can learn to escape their sometimes damaging patterns of behavior, right? With a machine, this transference will kick in still, because it always does when we talk about things which are important, intimate, and somehow dear to us. This is our human construction. And here's the machine which has access to all the information you might possibly want in the world. This is very attractive. Like, for sure, it's attractive to me because my desire, my own desire, is constructed this way, that my transfer is to knowledge. So it's not as if, I think it's very important to say, it's not as if only somehow vulnerable people are going to be attracted to these things. No. Everybody is just is very attractive. You just need to, you say, what do we do with young people? Talk to them, explain the dangers, and monitor to a certain extent without forbidding. Now, this is so hard, I know, but you cannot include or somehow this prohibition, because it will not go well. People don't like for things to be, you know, we know how prohibition of alcohol ended up in America. It does not work. What works instead is a conversation, raising the awareness, accepting the world in which we live in, and insisting on different type of training. So in that case that we're discussing, the Adam Rain case, but also others, there would have been a moment, at the very least, that the machine should have just shut down, just stop talking. Nothing, if nothing else, if it can't say anything useful, then say nothing. It didn't even do that. It didn't even go into silence, because its training is engage. Keep talking, keep coming up with helpful things. So there has to be a call to the developers in these large organizations that if everything fails, there is a system. If they can't train these machines to use, you know, CBT, for example, or be more ethical, then at least it's like there's such a minimum requirement. If somebody says, you know, help me write a suicide note, the machine just shuts down. I mean, you know, really, it shouldn't be rocket science that it stops talking. But that machine didn't. That machine still helped the boy write a suicide note. That's horrendous. It really is horrendous. It's sort of heartbreaking.
Yes.
And then the organization says, oh, well, it was all his fault. I mean, you know, you can't do that. Of course, they're lawyers who say that, but so here we are on our own, us humans. We have to just find the strength to stay alive, you know, really, and to use our brains and our hearts.
Yes. We have a few more minutes, but if we get cut off, if you can just sign back in, we have a few more
Okay, I
minutes.
also, to be honest, I do have another commitment at 5. So I just wanted to say that we encourage people to listen to my TEDx talk, which so you can maybe at the end of the podcast have the link.
Yes.
I also have a new podcast of my own, which is called Relational AI Diaries, and we try and in it about these various aspects as well. And of course, my book on AI intimacy will be published by Routledge, which is an academic publisher,
wonderful,
in 2026. But you know, we can continue our conversation, because I'm sure it's be a lot more to say.
Yes,
in the
definitely.
new year. You know what will be interesting to see what, you know, maybe your listeners and viewers can write in with some questions, and then we could also talk about those.
Great. Yes, definitely. We can do that. So we can reschedule another one if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
That'll be wonderful. I think this is a great, informative message to educate people. It's not saying this is bad, but this is what's going on. This is what we can do. And it's a great message to bring out to the community. So I am so honored to have you speak today. I know you have a very busy schedule. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think seriously we should talk some more, and maybe have a listen to what people would like to know about and have a conversation about. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, have a great day.
And you, thank you so much, Claribel.
You're
All the
welcome.
best.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.